Hello, and welcome to Reimagining Love. I'm Dr. Alexandra Solomon. I have been studying relationships for over 20 years as a couples therapist, a professor, an award-winning author, and as a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and friend. Now, I'm inviting you into this space each week as I dig into some of the toughest and most fascinating relational dilemmas of our time. If you want to discover how to create vibrant and loving relationships in your own life, you have come to the right place. This is Reimagining Love. My guest on today's episode is Jillian Tur, a certified relationship coach, teacher, and author of the new book, It Begins With You, The 9 Hard Truths About Love That Will Change Your Life, and the host of the podcast, Jillian on Love. She has helped thousands over the last 20 years through her teachings, courses, writing, and her popular social media accounts to revolutionize their relationship with themselves so that they can transform their romantic relationships. Her compassionate yet no-nonsense approach has really landed for folks, and I'm so glad I got to sit down with her today to dive into her debut book and her personal journey. One of the central tenets of Jillian's work is the idea that the common denominator in all your relationships is you. I think a lot of us know in our bones that creating safety inside ourselves is the key to healthy relationships with others, but we don't always know how to do this or where to start. If you're in that spot, I know you're going to get a lot out of this episode. I also enjoyed talking with Jillian about estrangement and navigating complex relationships with family members. And I think you will be interested to hear what she has to say on those points. It might surprise you. Stay tuned for my conversation with Jillian. Jillian, thank you for being here with me on Reimagining Love.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. So by way of diving in, I would love to ask you the question that I ask all of the guests of the show. Are you ready for the question?
I'm ready.
So Jillian, how are you reimagining love in one of your important relationships these days?
I think the task that's always before me is how can I love more selflessly? Especially for me and family and sisters. Ram Dass has a famous quote that says, if you think you're enlightened, spend, a day or spend an evening with family, right? So we're so, as you know, we're so easily triggerable. We're so easily triggered by family. And I really believe that one of our greatest tasks as human beings and as social animals is how to get along with family. And so the way that I'm reimagining love is more about how can I transcend whatever old BS that I have that's being triggered by something. And I'm very close with my sisters, by the way, but there's still those moments. And how do I show love, which to me translates as compassion and empathy and patience without taking things so personally, which is sort of like what the ego does, takes everything personally.
I think that we don't spend nearly enough time talking about all of the little treasures and challenges that come up in our relationship with our siblings. I think there's a lot of, I think collectively, we're doing a lot of this intergenerational exploration that, therapists have been doing behind their office doors, for generations. But I love like this big collective conversation we're having. But when we're talking about family dynamics, we're oftentimes talking about parents and adult kids and looking at that relationship. And I think that's huge. But what you're saying in your response is that you are finding yourself navigating your relationship with your sisters, which you're close to. There's a lot of dear, love and affection there, but that you are navigating all the ways in which you can become really activated in those relationships. And I for sure resonate with that with my own siblings and how my siblings are these forever teachers to me, holding up these mirrors of like, wait, what is this like really young, really insistent part of me that comes forward in my relationship with my siblings? I'm aware of it with my parents, certainly, but with siblings as well. So I'm glad that you are inviting our, lens in that direction of what our siblings have the power to teach us about ourselves in our reactions to them.
Absolutely. And if you have more than one sibling, our relationship with each sibling is different. So what you're confronted with in each relationship is different. I have two older sisters. Both of my parents and my step parent have passed away. So a lot of the time, for many, many years, it was trying to reimagine love with my father and with my mother. And so now this is the family that's left behind. It's the only real family that I have. So yeah, and as we get older, the dynamics change. Like some things never change and some things change a lot, much to our disappointment or much to our fear and discomfort, right? It's like, no, I want it to be the way that it was when I was 15 and it's not anymore. And adjusting to that.
I have a full sibling, I have a step sibling, and I have a half sibling. And my half sibling, my half brother, is 12 years younger than me. And he and I were in a conversation last year where he was offering me deep words of wisdom, deep words of compassion, like kind of holding space for me. And it was such a flip of the script because I'm the big sister. The advice and the guidance and the wisdom is supposed to flow in one direction only. And it was such a reminder to me that, yeah, we aren't who we were when I was 15 and he was 3. And we don't have to be. And like we get to now play in these different spaces and these different roles, but it required me to shed a story I had about him as my like the little brother. That's just my little
Totally.
brother. No,
Yeah.
that is a wise man who's got something really important to
Important
offer
to
me.
say. Yeah, absolutely. Totally. So that's big. Unfortunately, I think there's a little too much talk these days about estrangement and,
Oh, thank
having
you.
boundaries with family and I think there's too much encouragement of estrangement in situations that are not abusive, right? In situations where it's, obviously there are circumstances where you should be estranged from your family if there was major abuse but this encouragement of estrangement is just that I'm seeing all over social media from huge accounts too, I think is really incredibly detrimental to people. I was estranged from my father for many years and let me tell you, it messed me up. It was my choice. It was the need of the moment, but over time, it didn't serve me in any way. Estrangement is a heavy load, and be careful what you wish for, when you don't want to speak to family because it can weigh heavily on a person's shoulders and heart.
Yeah. One of the ways that I imagine, one of the ways that I know that it hangs heavy, it, I think it sends, if I cut myself off from somebody, there's a message I'm also giving myself that I can't create safety inside of me. I can't navigate nuance inside of me. And this is all I can do is a really blunt tool. So there's a way that I worry almost more about the message I send myself in cutting somebody off than the message I send to the other person.
Well, I know when I decided to no longer return my father's calls, I mean, I was so young and I didn't know how to create safety inside myself. And I think that that's really important. I think that's this whole idea of creating safety inside oneself is a very important conversation for all relationships because I believe that a relationship, first and foremost, should feel safe. But, and it's not the but, it's the and we need to be able to create or have a container within ourselves that creates some sort of safety within ourselves rather than always looking to the other person or the other people to make us safe. It's really a balance there.
Yeah. Okay, that's one of my questions that I have for you. So I just to kind of orient us here, we are in this conversation because you are putting a beautiful new book out into the world, your first book. It's called It Begins With You: The 9 Hard Truths About Love That Will Change Your Life. And I know it's going to be a really important guide for all of the readers who engage with this work. And so before I ask you about creating safety, which I want to get to, I would love for you to speak a little bit to the journey, your journey to this book, your journey with this book. Tell us a little bit about what that's been like for you.
It's been a long journey. I taught yoga for many years. I've been practicing yoga for about 26 years and was teaching it for almost 20 years. And I didn't really know, after about 7 years of teaching it, I mean, yoga is still like my greatest love, but I didn't know where I was going to take teaching it. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll just have babies and then, just teach yoga and have babies. Anyway, I ended up getting married, and it was a very difficult marriage and a short marriage. It only lasted 2 years. And when it ended, it was just completely catastrophic for me. It was the way he ended it was terrible. I went through a miscarriage. My mom was dying of cancer. And so I really entered a profound dark night of the soul. I mean, it was a darkness that was, I don't know, it's really hard to describe. It's just one that you really have no idea how you're going to get yourself out of it. However, I did with lots of help. And I really became obsessed with what makes a relationship, specifically a romantic relationship, work. I was horrified and terrified that I was divorcing and that I was the age that I was, and all that societal and social conditioning that was looming over me. And I became obsessed with how I was going to get myself out of the hell that I was in. And I became obsessed with relationships, romantic relationships. And that was a little bit over 10 years ago, or about almost, actually, not a little bit over, almost 11 years ago. And I decided I'm going to figure this out. So I studied, I got certified as a coach, I hired mentors, and I figured it out. And it gave me the insight into what really happened between myself and my ex-husband. And I am a teacher at heart. That's really just sort of my calling, is to teach. So I thought I have to teach this. And so I started teaching it to the audience that I had already cultivated for many years in the yoga community in New York City. And, the rest is history. And I felt compelled to write. I started a newsletter, never really written anything before. And that became incredibly successful fast. And I knew I had a couple of books in me, but I didn't know how I was going to do it. And, everything lined up. Everything is really timing. It's kind of amazing. It's just everything lined up. And I thought to myself, what are the things, the truths, the principles, the laws, whatever you want to call it, that I really want to leave behind for people based on my own experience and based on working with thousands of people, because I was like a beast when it came to working one-on-one with people. I had no other life other than that, because I wanted experience. And I birthed these 9 truths. And so that's how it all came to be.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell. Right. That's right. In a nutshell. In a nutshell. So I want to stay with that theme of safety, because I've got it as a question I want to ask you. You write a lot in the book about choosing yourself. So start there. So talk to us about, what does that mean to choose yourself?
I think to choose yourself means different things for different people and different scenarios. Choosing yourself could mean I'm going to challenge myself to overcome an obstacle, as opposed to avoid the obstacle and stay stuck in life. That's one example of choosing yourself. Choosing yourself is not begging someone to love you. Choosing yourself is learning to be a communicator in a relationship or in dating when you've never been a communicator. Choosing yourself is committing yourself to the life that you want to live and lead. What does that mean? That means that you're going to have to confront fears. That means you're going to have to confront old stories and conditioning. That means you're going to confront your excuses, which are basically rooted in fear. That's what it means to me, at least. And that's what I try to convey to others. And not over focusing on someone else's life.
As you say that, it's not choosing yourself over somebody else. It's not choosing yourself instead of somebody else. It's choosing yourself in order. What I hear you saying is it's choosing yourself in order to be in relationship in a way that serves the relationship.
Yes. Or it's choose yourself when someone is not treating you the way that you deserve and exiting the relationship. But more so than not, the message is choose yourself to be the best person that you can be so that your relationships can be healthier. All of them.
You wrote that for a lot of your life, you had been filled with fear and doubt and uncertainty. So choosing yourself meant figuring out how you were going to create safety and certainty within yourself. So can you give us like that somatic felt sense of what does feeling safe and certain inside of you feel like?
It can look different. And, so sometimes that safe feeling and certain feeling inside of yourself can feel like a calm, like a contentment. It's like the antithesis of living inside your head and rumination. It's steady. But also feeling safe and certain in oneself can be much more robust. It can be like, damn straight. I don't think I know. I am certain I can do this. And that to me is not anxious, but it's also not calm and serene. And I think that oftentimes what's conveyed in these sort of somatic practices is that to feel safe means to feel calm. Well, sure, if what you're trying to do is quell a lot of anxiety, but if what you're trying to do is counteract doubt, then calm is, to me, is not the opposite of doubt. To me, the opposite of doubt is certainty. And the image that immediately comes to my head is like a superhero, honestly. And that's why I use the word robust. So it's different. So safety can feel different depending on what it is that you need. There's the safety of like, I'm not in danger, but then there's the certainty of I am the conductor of my life. And I think both of them are manifestations of what it means to feel safe inside ourselves.
And the certain one is not about I'm certain of the outcome. It's I'm certain that I am showing up in a robust way for this whatever this experience is.
Absolutely. It's I'm certain that whatever happens, I can handle it. I can do it. I can face it. It's resilience.
I'm thinking about before I give a talk, the way that I kind of get myself oriented for a talk is I imagine my feet kind of like deeply like anchored, inside of the earth as sort of a grounding that I do. And then I imagine opening up sort of the top of my head and like bringing in like a ton of like white light, like energy coming down through me, my feet anchored. And then I just imagine like a big wide beam coming out of my heart, like
Oh, I love that.
that is just like, okay, I can hold this entire, I've got this whole space. And that to me, that is both safe and certain, right? I have no idea how the talk's going to go. I have no idea what questions people are going to ask me, but I know that I'm in my most robust, ready place.
Yes. I love that. I love that visualization. I'm going to
Hmm.
try it myself.
Oh, it's been so helpful. And then where I connected around the safety was I was thinking about a difficult conversation that I was recently in. And I was in this difficult conversation and I felt so sure inside of myself that I wasn't going to get rattled. Like no matter where this other person went, they were flooded and they were bringing a lot of stuff to me. And I knew I wasn't going to get hooked. I knew I was safe within me. I wasn't going to get engaged or tangled up in a way that was going to make a hard conversation harder. And that's not always a place that I have known, or can stay in. But that was a really felt sense of like, oh, okay, I've got a lot of safety inside of me in this conversation. And I'm just not going to get dragged somewhere that I don't want to get dragged.
That must have felt great. It's a
Mm-hmm.
great feeling.
Mm-hmm. Is there a practice or two that you have found to be particularly helpful with your clients when they are like kind of those somatic, you are, I think it's part of what makes you such an effective coach is you are so grounded in the body. And in fact, your your relational coaching work emerged from all of your somatic practices. So are there one or two kind of tried and true ones that you really like, perhaps for somebody who's just beginning to make these connections for themselves?
Yeah, well, it always starts with the breath. The breath is the gateway to your body. So when someone is in some sort of agitated state, right? They feel sort of off kilter. They're not centered, they're not balanced. They're the opposite of what you experience in that difficult conversation that you just talked about. Every single time, without fail, their breath is shallow. And what's happening is that there's a lot of the breath gets trapped specifically around the throat area and the chest area. So a deeper breath through the nose to get the breath to actually go down towards the belly and even further down towards the pelvic floor if it's possible for the person. And then a slow exhale is the first thing. Nothing can be done. I mean, and sometimes that's the only thing that needs to happen is someone to deepen their breath and to move the breath from being stuck in the throat and chest area down into the abdomen and into the pelvic floor. And so that's the first thing. And, I've also have done some yoga taught some yoga to some clients, just stretching. Sometimes it's just sitting up. Sometimes it's twisting the body. Sometimes I just have them go for like a light walk and then they just come right back. I have them sit differently in the chair. For some people, it's closing their eyes and putting one or both hands across their chest, their breastbone, and just breathing there. Sometimes it's onto the abdomen, but it's always the breath. And it's miraculous. It works.
Yeah. And the thoughts and the feelings take on so much urgency that it feels almost frivolous to be in. I don't have time to slow down and do the breath because we have this thing that we have to figure out right now. And what you're saying is actually the thing can't get figured out. The conversation can't progress until and unless there's regulation inside of the body.
Absolutely. You have to. And regulation always begins with the breath. There is no regulation without learning how to use your breathing in order to create a shift in your state.
I like how often in the book you talk about walking, either having your clients walk or having couples walk. I'm a huge fan of whenever my husband and I need to have a difficult conversation. I'm like, there's no way I can sit on this couch and have this conversation. Like
Yeah, I hear you.
we gotta walk. I can't be like making all this eye contact. I can't be this still in my body. We've got to get our bodies moving. I'm just such a fan of that.
It's amazing. It's a great co-regulation skill. And it's just great for people in general. We're designed to walk. We
Mm-hmm.
really are as human beings. So to have hard conversations while walking, or just if you need to calm down to go for a walk, so important.
So important. So important. This is another excellent tool. What do you find are some of the kind of common and maybe surprising or unexpected points of grief along the journey to deeper self-understanding, deeper self-love? I think we talk a lot about like what we gain, through this introspective work. But what are some of the things that we lose or some of the points of grief that people may just do well to be aware of that can happen along the way?
That's a good question. I think what a lot of people think is that in order to renew themselves in some way, that they have to lose a part of them, right? They have to grieve a part of themselves that is no longer relevant. And I truly believe that we all have multiple personalities and multiple parts to ourselves. And I think it's more about putting the wiser, stronger parts of ourselves in the driver's seat. And the other parts you don't actually have to grieve. Like they're there and they're not going anywhere. And you have to actually give them love. So I just wanted to mention that because there's that grieving that people say, you have to grieve a part of yourself. And I know that feeling very well. I know the feeling of having to grieve something about yourself because life has changed. But I also often ponder the delusion in that thinking and that kind of thinking. Like, is that person that you're grieving, do they actually ever go away? I don't think so. I think they're still part of you, and you have to kind of sometimes return back to that person or be resourceful. I think that there's grieving, obviously, sometimes relationships, romantic relationships do have to end, and they should end. And the grieving process of, let's say, exiting a relationship that wasn't good for you, or the grieving process of the person leaving you and you don't have any choice, and then you're having to sort of rebuild. And I think that there's tremendous grief in that.
I think it's so important what you're saying about how we relate to the earlier versions of ourselves. Yeah, that those it's interesting. It kind of reminds me of what we were saying before about the cutoffs and the estrangement. It's like I think sometimes there's a desire to kind of cut ourselves off from those earlier versions of ourselves that didn't know better. They had limited skill sets. And what you're saying is, no, there might be a resource there that you need again, or at least an honoring of, you didn't get to this moment here right now without that version of you. That version got you from point A to point B to get to point C. So there's something really loving about honoring those versions of ourselves that didn't know better, that did harm, that were harmed, and maybe they need to retire or rest or kind of, hang out in a serene space because they've done what they needed to do, but they don't need to be exiled.
Yes, exactly. And sometimes those older versions of ourselves are more fun. They had a lot of fun too, even though maybe it was irresponsible fun. So then it's about getting sort of mystical here, but what truly is the spirit of that older version of yourself, not necessarily the behavior or the maturity level.
Uh-huh.
And then maybe that's, you don't let go of the spirit of who they actually are on the inside. And this is a we're going very philosophical now,
Oh,
but
I
it's just
love it
something I
though.
think.
I love it though. You're right. Because yeah, so that's kind of a flip, isn't it? That there was wisdom. There was wisdom in that, right? She was a party girl, but she had this, whatever, a kind of fearlessness or a orientation towards pleasure. Yeah. Or a spark. And so how does she get to be a part of your world today, even as you practice sobriety or, practice care inside your body? How can that spark? What does that spark look like today? There's a part where you're writing about the unhealthy patterns that existed between you and your ex-husband. And you said, I didn't have the tools to communicate well when things got tough between us. I also didn't know how to ask for what I needed because I had no idea asking for what you need was even a thing that one does in a relationship. I also couldn't put my needs aside to listen to him when he was upset because I felt like a constant victim. And I would love for you to speak more to how our unhealed wounds, how our lack of self awareness or our struggles with self awareness not only keep us from getting the love we want, but they keep us from giving the love that the people around us really want from us.
When we feel hurt in a relationship, and it's very possible that that hurt is extremely valid. But when we feel hurt in a relationship, we can become very easily obsessed with what we're not getting and what we need. And if we want to make a romantic relationship work, and of course, like we said, there's tons of gray and nuance, and every situation is different. And sometimes you're in a relationship with a terrible person, you need to get out. Like we know all that, right? Loving, kind, compassionate, giving people can be incredibly selfish too when they are pushed to the edge of their insecurity within a relationship. Because we go into a survival mode and then we're just thinking, me, what do I need? What am I getting? Do I feel safe? Do I feel loved? And mature love, in my view, is yes, you want to have your own back, but it's also how can I give love? How am I as a partner? Not just how are they as a partner? I worked with in the beginning of my career doing this, I worked with many, many couples. And what I saw often was that people feel like each other's victim. And these are situations where there was no abuse, right? And they felt like each other's victim. And it occurred to me that if they were going to make their marriage work, make their relationship work, they can't do it from a place of victimhood. They had to get into a much better state, and they had to see their role in how they were messing things up. And so love isn't just about receiving, love is also about giving. And so, when I reflect back on my relationship with my ex-husband, it's been so long and I've processed so much. I don't really have any emotional attachment to it. I think that's why I was ready to write the book, because I was writing some things and it just was like, okay, I was able to be objective. Objectively speaking, it takes two to tango. Objectively speaking, he was the bigger problem in the relationship. He was, because of certain things that he did that were cruel and unkind. But that does not mean that I was this shiny beacon of like hope in the relationship. I was really limited in my understanding of what it is to meet another person's needs, as much as I was limited in my ability to speak up for what I needed.
Ooh, it's how I know, so often in my work with couples, it is work that is happening in the wake of infidelity and a couple's trying to navigate, where do we go from here? And so in that situation, there's very obviously somebody who is the betrayed partner, and there's very obviously somebody who's done harm. But I know that we're getting somewhere different when that betrayed partner is also looking at the ways in which they have been harmful and hurtful, none of which makes infidelity an excuse or okay or da da da. But it's a really different place in the process when the betrayed partner also holds on to the ways in which they have been harmful and hurtful. And the way I love how you said limited, just limited in what they've been able to offer. And again, it is not, I think the field of couple therapy has done a disservice for a long time in sort of equating staying together with success and breaking up with failure, even, in the treatment, in how the couple therapist, self-identifies or orients to the work. And so I think we've done a disservice. I think we're doing a better job now that guiding people through a really gentle process of ending is also a successful outcome.
Oh, absolutely. It's okay when a relationship doesn't last.
One of the ways that you write about choosing ourselves is choosing to sit with our discomfort rather than running away, rather than avoiding, and rather than controlling. So I would love to talk a bit with you about how do we start to recognize that our desire to control our circumstances or other people is actually a direct result of our difficulty sitting with our own discomfort. Can you just speak a little bit about that? How we can, because the control feels necessary or caregiving or loving. So, how do we start to recognize that as, oh, wait a minute, maybe this is much more to do with me than the other person?
Well, I would say two things. One is it's a habit. So we all have habits in life, and some of our habits are working for us and some of them are working against us. And the things that we do when we feel out of control, aka anxious, in a relational situation, we all have sort of like a pattern that we go to. And some people, they learned like, if I could just micromanage everything and just control everything and control the other person, then that's what gives me my certainty back. Other people, if they could just like avoid it, sweep it under the rug, like that's how they're getting sort of like their certainty back. And so I think that it's really about bringing the awareness to, oh, I'm doing that thing again. What's underneath it? How do I feel? Oh, I feel out of control. I feel anxious. Okay, what is that all about? Is there a conversation that needs to be had? What I'm trying to do in essence is to encourage people to sit with whatever it is that they're feeling instead of mindlessly going into their habit that they do that doesn't help them or help the relationship in any way. So really it's a practice of mindfulness and just being aware of that. So sitting with the discomfort is just like, oh, I want to control this. But getting underneath like the hood of the car and trying to figure out, well, what is it that you're feeling? Like, why are you feeling this? Where do you feel it in your body? What else can you do? Rather than avoid. So if you normally avoid, don't anymore. And I know that that sounds so, what if I can't? No, you can. Like people, we're in control of, unless we are suffering from extreme mental illness, we are in control of our behavior. Like we can do it. It just takes practice, right? So if you're used to avoiding, you're going to have to confront the discomfort of your anxiety and your overwhelm and just staying put. If you're used to just controlling, you're going to have to confront the anxiety and the out of control feeling that you feel of just letting things be.
And for the person who's avoiding, the turning towards a problem rather than avoiding a problem doesn't have to be a 180. It could be the tiniest slice. Like, what is the micro, what is the smallest tolerable version of confronting a problem that you can do? You don't have to do it all. Rome wasn't built in a day. So if we're changing a habit, you can change the habit a little bit today and a little bit tomorrow and a little bit the next day. Right. I think that so often we think that the healing, it has to be like this deep healing that then results in behavior change. But the arrow goes the other way too, that the little bitty baby behavior change sends a deep message inside of what's possible inside of this self of ours.
Absolutely. And we're very motivated by pleasure and by success. So if we see that something is working, because we want what's on the other side of the fear. That's ultimately it. And so we have to understand that what is on the other side of the fear is actually quite pleasurable. It's much more pleasurable than staying on the other side, if that makes sense.
I think it's also so someone who's listening, who's thinking, okay, I maybe have an idea of how I might do just a little micro confrontation or turning towards. I think it's also really important to pair that behavior with like a whole happy dance celebration, like big hug, like to land that new behavior, like so that you complete the loop. It's not just that you did a thing, it's that you land that sense of pride, accomplishment, agency that then fuels the next iteration of it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so then what's the corollary for control? So if I'm somebody who orients to managing discomfort through control, then my micro step is going to be to resist the urge to manage somebody else's behavior. And when I do that, I need to celebrate it. But I think the thing I see a lot is, okay, fine. I'm not going to do control. I'll just pull back and see what happens. And it sometimes has almost this energy of like testing the other person. Like, well, if I don't do it, I'll just pull. And I think what you're talking about here, it's not a test. It's really nothing to do with the other person and how they're going to respond to our changed behavior. It's just a shift for me as I try to develop the capacity to sit with a bit more discomfort inside my own body.
Yeah, and letting go of control can look so different for different people depending on their relationship. For one person, it might be, you know what, I'm going to stop trying to change my partner. This is who I married, or this is who I partnered with, and I'm either going to let them go through their process, or I can make the decision that them not changing is too much for me and I can exit the relationship. Because sometimes we want to change our partner so that we can feel more comfortable and safe. So it's really understanding, like you're just wanting to get that safety. Sometimes letting go of the control it's literally someone else going at a different pace than you, whatever that is, and you wanting them to be on your pace. And so the slowing down and letting go of control might look like, well, why am I rushing to begin with? Why am I so anxious to begin with? What is this all about? Can I live and let live this other person? I mean, when you do that, it's quite liberating, wonderful feeling. You're like, it's not my problem, all good.
Uh-huh. And the thing you might end up saying is, God damn it. The reason that I want them to go faster, like in me letting them go at their own pace, what I realize is, shit, that's a really nice pace. I could benefit actually from that pace that they go at rather than speeding them up. My lesson here is, there's some beauty in me slowing the hell down. Okay, before I let you go, I want to speak a little bit to the folks who are listening and who are dating, because you have an entire lesson about the difference between love and lust. And you share that being desired isn't the same thing as being valued. So help the Reimagining Love listener who is dating kind of feel their way into that distinction between being desired, which feels so darn good and being valued.
Yeah. So when I think about being desired, I think about lust, I think about chemistry, I think about attraction, and all those feelings are incredibly seductive and addictive when you start seeing someone who you like and you're attracted and you're feeling all that. But when someone actually values you, they are not just thinking about having sex with you. They actually want to know you, they're curious about you. They're not in some manipulative, strategic pattern of trying to get you to be more interested in them, or they're not just in seductive mode. They are actually like, wow, like, I like you. I want to get to know you. And so I think that people need to, especially women, need to know the difference that in order to see potential in another person being a co-builder with you in terms of building a relationship, you need to really feel like this person wants to understand you on a profound level. When we're in lust, I think that we're all sort of in a little bit, and it's fun, a little bit of a game of how can I, where we're trying to manipulate how the other person perceives us because our primary goal is to get the person. And valuing someone, that takes a little bit more time. Yeah, it's different.
I think it's a really wise distinction. And I'm a lady who's been married for 26 years. So this, it's been a minute. It's been a minute since I've experienced, but I am certainly, I always say like, I'm the one in like, I'm just like the biggest cheerleader for the people who are dating. And I want to be an ally and a support because I have such just, deep respect for the challenges and deep fascination by all of the self work that happens when somebody is putting themselves in the ring and dating and experience. I think there's so much growth and healing that comes from that process. But I know how compelling it is to feel desired and how in some ways it bypasses, it is a solution. It is an answer to the question of, am I okay? Right? If their desire is coming at me so strong and so clear and so forcefully, it feels like a balm. It feels like an answer to like, okay, I must be okay. I must be worthy if the desire is this strong. And you are inviting us into a really different paradigm that actually it's about the two of you entering a space together slowly, again and again, repeatedly over time, in which knowing and being known, understanding and being understood is actually, that's the longer term, more viable growth pattern rather than just like, okay, I got him. There's a ton of energy coming my way.
Yes, that was so well said. And how easy it is to get drunk on that kind of attention.
Oh my God, yeah.
Lust and chemistry is there's something very youthful to it.
I was just thinking about that with sort of my midlife clients, who are divorced maybe after a marriage that has been really lonely for a long time. I think at midlife, when someone's experiencing that lust, it's different and it's a recapturing, I think, of something that
Yeah, it's a
feels.
recapturing. It's like you feel so alive.
Yeah.
And we don't think clearly. So
No.
so don't give your
Uh-huh.
heart to someone until you know that there's value there. And the way that you know that there's value there is that you feel that they really value you and you value them. Like you really, this is like not just about sex. This is about something else.
But do you think, though, that when a person in the dating world, whether they're 25 or 55, when they've got that ability to kind of create safety and certainty inside of themselves, they can play with that erotic energy. They can play with the flirtiness, and it's playful then. It's something they get to dip
It's a
into.
dance.
Yeah, it's a dance rather than an answer, a solution, a bypass.
Absolutely. And just not to, because a lot of people, they go into the dating world and they are seeking that validation. I understand that. And they're seeking validation and there's a naivete. Like, so naivete plays a very big role in all of this. It's like the naivete of, wow, this person, I must be amazing, or this person must really like me. Well, their attraction to you is not the same thing as them really, really valuing you. And that's really the main thing. Like, just don't confuse, have fun with it, find the safety within. Like, it is so fun. It's not going to last. So you better enjoy it while you have it. but don't confuse it with what it's not.
In the best scenario, what happens to that early playful chapter is it becomes a touch point then. So then 5 years later, when you're sitting on the couch and you're, fuzzy jammies, you're like, oh my God, remember that? Remember that one night where we couldn't even keep our hands off each other, right? It becomes the reminiscence. And that's what I see with happy couples is that all that early stuff, it becomes part of the memory bank. And it's something that couples can then dip into to kind of continue to source themselves. But there's a ton of grief in that, isn't there? That when that early stuff kind of transitions to something a bit more steady and a bit more stable, it can feel like we've lost each other. No, that is because love is alive and dynamic and changing, but you still get to have those early experiences. Those are still yours.
Yes, absolutely. That's very well said.
Jillian, this has been so much fun to go all these places with you. Anything you feel like we haven't touched on that we absolutely have to explore before we go? Otherwise, I'm going to have you just let the people know how to keep learning and growing with you.
Yeah, I would just say get the book. Buy the book. You won't regret it. Gift it to your friends because there's a lot of people struggling when it comes to love and relationships. And where people can find me, basically just need to know the spelling of my name, JillianTurecki.com. I have a membership for women only called the Conscious Woman of Women who are trying to actually feel more conscious and mindful and safe in their bodies and in relationships. And you can find me on social media, Instagram, and of course, my podcast, Jillian on Love.
Well, thank you so much, Jillian.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Jillian, for joining me for this helpful and hopeful conversation. Each of us has work to do around self-compassion and self-understanding, whether we are partnered or single, and it is never too late to embark on that journey. I hope our conversation has reminded you of that fact. And if you are curious about Jillian's brand new book, It Begins With You, we've linked it in the show notes so you can check it out and dive in. Until next time, be well. Do you have a relationship question that you want answered on the show? Visit reimagininglove.com to send in a written or audio question. Questions can be about intimate partnerships, family relationships, friendships, you name it. If you're looking for more love and relationship content, you can find me on Instagram at dr.alexandra.solomon or visit my website, dralexandrasolomon.com, where you'll find my blog as well as the Intimate Relationships 101 e-course based off of the popular class I teach at Northwestern University. Thank you for listening and see you next week here on Reimagining Love.